dreary day in San Francisco's Japantown, just across from Peace Plaza, there was a call for peace.
Assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon all of you.
Muslim and Arab Americans joined forces with Japanese Americans to call for an end to the fiery rhetoric that they say is creating a dangerous environment for people of Middle Eastern descent.
There are far too many people who are spouting messages of hate and violence.
We should all work together so that we can change the hearts and minds and stop this racial profiling and racial discrimination.
San Francisco's public defender Jeff Adachi made an impassioned plea for change.
When we hear about acts of vandalism that are occurring every day, even throughout California, we have to stand up and support those who are being victimized.
Since the ISIS attack on Paris last month, there's been a dramatic increase in attacks on mosques and Muslims across the country, including here in the Bay Area. Just a day ago, I covered the story of a man who allegedly threatened to kill the people of a Richmond mosque and was found to have a fake pipe bomb. At this news conference, presidential candidate Donald Trump was the primary target.
Your politics of fear, your politics of hate, your politics of division is really tearing up our country. You have no clue what you have done to America. Our little girls, Muslim little girls, are terrified. They don't want to go to school.
It's not just Muslim and Arab American adults who are feeling victimized and targeted by this rhetoric, it's also children. And that's something that Korematsu can relate to because of her own childhood.
The kids would say it was my fault for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They would call me all kinds of racist names. They would say, go back to Japan, you don't belong here. And it was a very, very scary time.
And if they go to school, army is going to come and get them. Because that's what they're told in the school by their fellow students, that your ISIS and people army is going to come and get them.
Eerie similarities between two times more than 70 years apart. Hiroshi Kashiwagi was born in Sacramento, but was still taken to Tule Lake internment camp when he was 19 years old.
What happened to us makes me fearful of what might happen.
In San Francisco, I'm John Sasaki, KTVU, Fox News.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from KTVU Fox News, our Master of Ceremonies for the evening, Mr. John Sasaki.
Hello, how are you? How are you doing this evening? Is everybody doing well? There's a heck of a performance by these youngsters on the taiko. Let's give them a big round of applause for the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. I thank all of you for being here as well. This is going to be a wonderful evening. We're all going to learn a lot tonight, I promise you. First off, allow me to express my condolences to the family and friends of Wilkes Bashford. He was president of the Board of Trustees here at the Herbst, and he died 2 weeks ago. He was memorialized yesterday. He was one of the most well-known people in San Francisco. He was a luxury clothier, friends with Willie Brown. He was a piece of San Francisco history, and he was so well known that I, as like a 10-year-old in the East Bay growing up, I knew who he was because I read Hurricane every day, and it was amazing to see his life through the eyes of Hurricane, and so he did live a full and remarkable life, 82 years, and I know he's going to be missed here, so I just wanted to say a few words about him. Now, I mentioned my childhood in the East Bay. I grew up in El Cerrito, Brooklyn. I attended Castro Elementary School in El Cerrito. Now, I say that because this morning, that school, which a few years ago was shut down and rebuilt, was rededicated as the Fred Korematsu Middle School. It was an amazing feeling for me. I sat there inside the multi-purpose room where they had the ceremony. Same location, different room obviously, but same location where I ate lunch many, many times as a kid and performed on the stage in drama. It was very weird to be in this new environment, to be seeing this and experiencing it. But it was a really visceral experience for me because it was so proud. It was such a proud moment to see the place of my early education renamed for the civil rights icon, this wonderful man, Fred Korematsu. So what does it take to have a school named after you? That is, if you don't have $1 million to give to somebody to have a name in your honor. In Fred Korematsu's case, it was being a lifelong leader in the fight for civil rights for everyone. I would guess most of us have not been in prison. Fred Korematsu was incarcerated, not because he was a criminal in the common sense of the term, but because he resisted the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. He was incarcerated for resisting the internment of men, women, elderly, children, all of whom were ripped from their homes and communities with nothing and placed in faraway camps in places like Arizona, Idaho, Arkansas. Nobody wants to go to Arkansas anyway. Can you imagine? Okay, it's just a joke. I don't hate Arkansas. But can you imagine living in one of these cheap, ramshackle camps in the middle of nowhere, behind barbed wire, under armed guard, no air conditioning, in the Arizona heat for years on end? It boggles the mind to imagine that's what Americans, over 100,000 Americans went through during our history, not that long ago. It was only 70, 75 years ago. Mr. Korematsu fought that mass incarceration, went to prison for it, went to the Supreme Court for it, and finally, 40 years later, had his conviction for defying government order overturned. He continued to lead the fight for justice and equal protection under the law for all Americans until he passed away in 2005. I had the great honor of interviewing him back in the late 90s. I know that my life would not be what it is today were it not for his leadership over the last half of the 20th century and beyond. I'm honored to be here to help celebrate Fred Korematsu on Fred Korematsu Day. I want to add one final bit of perspective about internment. A public policy poll last month, you may have heard this, if you haven't, hang on your seats. Public policy poll last month found that among supporters of Donald Trump in Iowa, 48% think that internment of the Japanese during World War II was the right thing to do. That's now. Certainly one of the problems that we as a nation face is a really fierce anti-intellectualism, this fear of knowledge, this kind of opposition to knowledge, in this case, the fear of or opposition to even knowing history. Winston Churchill said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Truer words not been spoken, honestly. So especially to the young people here, I say learn as much as you can about everything possible because knowledge is indeed power. So, our next guests join us from the Fred T. Korematsu Middle School in El Cerrito, where this evening the school is actually hosting its own Korematsu Day event. We are all sorry that we can't be there tonight. I know that Karen wishes she could be there. She said as much earlier today. This event is called Celebrate Korematsu. The students were asked to write a short speech answering the question, what does Fred Korematsu Day mean to me, the new school, or to this nation? Please welcome 8th grade winner Madeeha and 7th grade winner Vivian Wallace.
This is my speech on what Korematsu Day means to me. Who were your heroes when you were growing up? Think back to the old days. What posters did you hang on your bedroom walls? Maybe pictures of singers and bands, movies and actors? Now think again. How many people in those images represented something that you believed in? Fred T. Korematsu was born in Oakland, California on January 30th, 1919. He was the third of 4 sons to Japanese immigrant parents. On December 7th, bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii by Japan happened. And President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the U.S. military to move over 100,000 people of Japanese descent, the majority of whom were American citizens, from their homes and forced them into internment camps. But Korematsu didn't want to follow those orders. In 1942, at the age of 23, he refused to go to the government's internment camps for Japanese Americans. He wanted to continue his life as an American citizen. Korematsu is a national civil rights hero. If someone with the power of the government told you to do something which you refuse, even if you wanted to, you probably wouldn't because you know how much power the government has. You might not have done anything wrong, but you would still listen to the government because of its high-ranking power. But why would you want to spend your time at a camp when you did nothing wrong? Why is it that everyone else suffers for something a couple of people might have done? If you didn't do anything, you shouldn't be getting blamed or taking the consequences. Korematsu took a valiant heart. He knew that he didn't do anything wrong, and that he wanted to keep living his life as an American citizen. He stood his ground and did what he believed to be right. He wasn't going to a camp for doing absolutely nothing. These are the types of people we need. Korematsu, like Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, and Harvey Milk, was a national civil rights icon who represented courage. Courage is not something that you'll always have. It's something that you have to give. If you think something's very important, you need to show that you care. Even after Korematsu got arrested, he had so much potential that he kept fighting by taking his case to the Supreme Court. 13 years before Mrs. Park declined to surrender her seat on the Montgomery transport, 21 years before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, 23 years before Cesar Chavez dispatched the Great Picker Strike, and 35 years before Harvey Milk was at last chosen to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Korematsu took this forlorn stand and welcomed the heaviness of a civil rights disaster onto his shoulders. And for me, being an American Muslim teenager, Korematsu's legacy is more applicable presently than any time in recent memories. Almost 13 years after 9/11, we are yet seeing Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian Americans systematically profiled at airports, in places of worship, and in their own homes. We are seeing a model rise in Islamophobia among both conservatives and moderates. All these people fleeing threatened by undocumented immigrants, wanting to send them back, without giving them a chance. The things people would rather do, due to false interpretation and biased information from media about race and religion. Many people don't even care about the Syrian refugees, dying, freezing to death. All they know is what they hear, about how Muslims are terrorists. All they know is what they hear, about how Muslims are terrorists. They start to believe the false information they hear and feel that these poor people will bring jeopardy to them. After all, Americans are most proud to say this is the country of freedom, so they might as well show it. The purpose of Korematsu today is to educate students and the general public about Korematsu's legacy so that we can reduce racial and religious profiling today. That's what Korematsu Day means to me. Equivalent does not imply that we are all the same. Each of us is distinctive in our own particular exceptional way, yet we additionally have the normal qualities that make every one of us people. So each of us ought to be approached with open hearts and respect and treat others similarly. As Korematsu said, no one should ever be locked away simply because they share the same race, ethnicity, or religion as a terrorist. Thank you.
It is the phantom that stalks every part of society. We see it in classrooms, in workplaces, in Congress. When a schoolboy is questioned by the police by making his own clock. When a family is denied justice for the wrongful killing of their child. When it is proposed that a nation closes its borders to an entire religion. In countless more examples across the world and throughout history, and our daily thoughts and assumptions, in our words and deeds, it is there. It is perhaps the most sinister product of human culture, the thoughtless grouping of individuals according to external characteristics, the notion that we should treat people based on how they look or where they were born. As a dual citizen who moved to the US at the age of 11, I am very aware of how a person could be judged by culture or parentage. It goes against every principle on which the United States was founded. It is this terrible habit, of which we all are guilty, that finds its purest form in one very specific act, racial profiling. I was born more than 60 years after Fred Korematsu refused to submit to the overwhelming forces that sought to subject him and his peers to profiling in its bluntest form. And yet the prevalence and seriousness of profiling activity has not reduced in the years since. The Japanese American community is still not completely free from its clutches. Like all minority groups in our country, it continues to be exposed to profiling and prejudice. Yet, it is a testament to the work of Korematsu and others that Japanese Americans are no longer vulnerable to the extremes of abuse they experienced in the 1940s. His life and example have shown me two things. First, that the urgency of the fight against forces that seek to profile different sections of humankind is still as great as it ever was. And second, that this fight can be won. And so I close with Korematsu's most important quote, I think, for me, my school, and for the students of my generation across the nation. Protest, but not with violence. And don't be afraid to speak up. One person can make a difference, even if it takes 40 years.
See some future reporters right there. Yeah. Threatened here by. Thank you, Vivian and Madeeha, for those fantastic words. We appreciate that. And the United States, of course, is the most diverse country on earth. Our patchwork heritage is a source of our country's strength that extends to the diversity of our faiths and beliefs. As a nation of Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, non-religious people, and more, we live and work together, yet we are often unaware of basic traditions and deep values of our neighbors and friends. We need to develop a greater understanding of one another beyond the caricatures and the sound bites, because knowing our neighbors matters. We know a deeper understanding in one another reveals our common humanity.
Young girls, and I would always get the question of, is there hair under there?
Are there black Buddhists? Is the craziest thing people have ever said to me. Like, oh my God, there are black people who are Buddhists? Like, really? Because you're looking that one. So yes.
Someone asked me where I got my morality from, as if I couldn't have a concept of right or wrong without a perception of God in my life. I would say, yeah, actually they have hair, they color it, they cut it, they style it, just like we all do. So I would say that's probably one of the craziest questions.
I don't know if it was an ask me, it was somebody said, are you Egyptian? And I said, yeah. And they said, you can't be Egyptian. And I said, why not? They said, because Egyptians are extinct. That was insane to me.
Does God answer you when you speak to him kind of questions? The greatest value I have as a Christian is actually faith. Constantly reminding me of this amazing fact that Jesus Christ is the Savior. He died, and not only died, he defeated death and he came back.
It really is just being as good as you can, because how you are, what you say to people comes right back to you. That's what Hinduism is.
People just associate the way I look with what they've seen on TV after especially 9/11. Quite a few Sikhs were harmed and killed after 9/11. I think the one thing my faith teaches me is the equality of gender and race and religion.
Knowing that you stand for something that holds a lot of integrity and being able to make the right choices not only affects you, but it also affects the people that you come across.
I think my grandfather was the only guy to put up a flag on a national holiday in the whole neighborhood. So when I asked him about that, he says, because I'm proud to be an American. A Jewish American is a very important thing because we have our strong religious beliefs and our traditions, but we also adopted this country.
I think people think that atheists are just like they're mad at God or mad at someone that did something to them in religion. And that's just not true. Like I don't believe. just don't.
The biggest misconception people have about Buddhism is that it's a passive religion. You don't get angry, and you don't want to hurt people, and you just kind of sit there in this little meditative state until something happens.
I would say that people, if they don't know a Muslim person, I don't know that they can see that we're the teachers, the lawyers, the doctors, the police officers here in their town or on their block. The misconceptions stem from the not knowing, not understanding, and maybe not asking the right questions.
God is this huge concept, this huge idea. It made me think that I had to listen to other viewpoints and think maybe we made a book about all the things that religion agrees on between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. That would still be a pretty great book. And honestly, I think I enjoy life more because I'm able to look at things not just from one set of eyes. I can see them from different perspectives.
Grassroots work, from facilitating interfaith dialogues to holding regional events and leading campaigns for greater religious literacy. For more information about the group or to find out how you can get involved, please visit knowyourneighbors.us. Up next, please welcome to the stage our esteemed featured panelists who will be led in discussion by our moderator, John Diaz. Since 1996, he has been the editorial page editor for the San Francisco Chronicle. He also writes a weekly column in the Chronicle. His pieces have won numerous local, state, and national awards. He was also a juror for the Pulitzer Prizes 3 different years, including in 2015. He has been honored by his alma mater, Humboldt State, and was the university's 2010 commencement speaker, offering his advice to graduates on how they can use change and the uncertainty of the times to their advantage. Certainly an important theme as we tackle the challenges before us today. Please welcome the panelists, including Mr. Diaz, who is going to introduce everybody else.
Thank you very much, John. It's a great honor to be here tonight. I want to thank Karen for asking me to be here and putting together such an all-star panel to talk about these important issues. Really, for those of us who are familiar with the story of Fred Korematsu and the principled and courageous stance he took, and just the years that it took for him to finally get vindication, are well aware of the grave injustice to civil liberties that was done during World War II. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, I'm not sure that history lesson has been fully absorbed in this country. Earlier this year, David Bowers, the mayor of Renault, Virginia, talked about the internment of Syrian refugees and actually invoked the World War II internment, saying President Franklin D. Roosevelt felt compelled to sequester Japanese foreign nationals after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. A bit of a history glitch in there. It wasn't just foreign nationals, but we regress. And it appears that the threat to America from ISIS now is just as real and serious as it was from our enemies then. It's rather disturbing, but then we also had Jeb Bush talk about giving priority entry for Christians among the refugees. And then, of course, there's Donald Trump, and who talked about denying Muslims entry into the United States and also invoking the internment during World War II as a precedent. Now, he kind of waffled as to what he would have done in those days, saying he had to be there at the time to know, which I think is the main point here, is what happens in those moments of hysteria. But he talked about it being a tough decision, because war is tough, and winning is tough. We don't win anymore. We don't win wars anymore. We're not a strong country anymore. were just so off. I'm really glad to have the panel that we have to talk about it, which includes Grande, who is Director of the U.S. Department of Justice, Community Relations Services. Please welcome Grande. To my right is Farhana Khera, Executive Director of Muslim Advocates. Welcome. And to my left, someone many of you know who was involved in the Korematsu case, Bannai, who's a professor of law from the Seattle University School of Law and Director of the Fred T. Korematsu Center for Law and Equality. Lori, welcome. We are going to have some time for your questions and certainly look forward to those, but I thought we would get started with a question for Lori, which basically comes, don't they teach history anymore in school? Lori, how can it be that we have not learned the lessons of the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II? Haven't kids in school been taught about this? And what are those lessons that they should have learned?
So, there's a number of lessons, of course, from the Japanese American incarceration that unfortunately we haven't learned, and we continually need to relearn. First, I think it's the ways in which race, in which ignorance and fear combine to victimize and target minority communities, immigrant communities, communities of color. During World War II, Japanese Americans were treated as foreign, as spies, as potential saboteurs, and we see that today with the targeting of Muslim communities as being treated as, again, foreign and potential terrorists. The second lesson is the danger of what happens when we sacrifice civil liberties in the name of purported national security. We saw during World War II that Japanese Americans were incarcerated. Basically on the claim that there was military necessity that required that they be put into camps. And we know now there was no military necessity for that. And that the government is apt to overreach during times of perceived national crisis. And I'm looking forward to Farhana sharing with us the Hassan decision just recently in October, where NYPD was alleged and was engaged in acts of surveillance of Muslim communities in the name of security. And so we see again the concern about saying, well, we have to sacrifice civil liberties, and in fact the civil liberties of communities of color in the name of perceived security. And I think finally, the lesson we have to learn is the need to always speak up. And I know that that's kind of really a theme that Karen travels the country talking about. During World War II, very few people spoke up in defense of the Japanese American community. None of the major national civil rights organizations came out at least wholeheartedly against incarceration, and it's really important that people do speak up. Your first question, why haven't we learned? I think that even though people have been doing a lot to teach about the wartime incarceration, more needs to be done, and we're not doing enough. And I think secondly, as long as the country is dealing with issues of race and dealing with issues of bias, and until the country can really grapple with those issues, we're going to continue to see the targeting of minority communities.
Let me turn to Grande. What do you see at the Department of Justice in terms of anti-Muslim backlash today, especially in light of Paris and San Bernardino? What's your agency doing about it? And what do you think the federal government can do about this backlash?
Thanks, Sean. And I very much want to start by saying thanks to Karen and to the Foundation for this incredibly important and timely conversation, and to be on such a distinguished panel with Farhana and with Lori. This focus is about doing what's right, standing up for what's right, and promoting equal justice for all. And as we look today. My agency, Community Relations Service, one of our focus based on the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act is to prevent and respond to hate crimes. And with San Bernardino and with the Paris tragedy, you saw an immediate uptick. 38, in that month, there were 38 hate crimes of violence during that month, 18 right after San Bernardino. That was 3 times what you would typically have. And that's, to me, just the tip of the iceberg, right? Those are the things that are reported. As we know, something like 2/3 go unreported, especially when you think about the Muslim American community, when there's been a greater distrust of law enforcement specifically, and the belief that even if you did report it, that you might not get the help you wanted. So something that we're also seeing is bullying, right? What you're seeing in the schools, and that's a huge concern. There was the Ahmed Mohammed case, of course, the clock that we saw that here's what the school administrators were doing as well. And, you can go further back. I mean, I can certainly remember, I went to a high school in San Francisco where you had bullying, and I remember it was around I'm old enough to remember the Iran hostage crisis, and I had classmates who were bullying kids who looked Middle Eastern, but they were also bullying others, including myself, for being Asian. They weren't that bright, but they were equal opportunity bullies. I think that's an important point to remember too, that there's something that we have to think about. I want to just briefly, and I want to make sure we get to the conversation, is what can the government do? Just last month, Farhan's group had the 10th anniversary, and the Attorney General spoke at it. The first African-American woman, someone I'm very proud to serve under, Loretta Lynch. Yes. And she's made it one of her primary focus, to deal with the anti-Muslim issue. When it happened, when San Bernardino and Paris happened, there were many others who were involved. Jenny Yang, who's the head of the EEOC, spoke out against it in the workplace. Arnie Duncan, who is the Secretary of Education. And that's an important point. His point was that the leaders have to stand up to that. And I think hopefully what's different, I hope we get into this, is that what do all of us, different members of different groups, different minority groups, what do advocacy groups do? What can government do to make sure that we don't have this sort of problem?
Farhana, I want to get your take on this. It's one thing to have these protections in law. It's one thing to have the Attorney General speak out about it. It's quite another for a society to adhere to these values. And when you're talking about times of fear and stress, as Grande was saying, what, in your perspective, has been the experience of Muslim Americans in this era of rising concerns about terror?
Thank you for that question, John. Before I answer the question, I first want to take a moment to thank Karen and the organizers for inviting me to this event. It's truly an honor. I think as a lawyer, as a civil rights activist, as a Muslim, and as an American, I am truly inspired by the bravery of Fred Korematsu and the other brave Japanese Americans who challenged our government's very wrong-headed internment and relocation policy. So a great deal of gratitude and appreciation for Karen and for everyone involved with the Korematsu Institute. Going to your question, John, I'll maybe quote a text message I received shortly after Donald Trump called for special IDs or special badges for Muslims. And the text message I got from a Muslim mother of 2 young girls here in the Bay Area was this: I am so disturbed. I am truly frightened. And it wasn't just a message from her. We've been hearing from countless mothers and fathers and American Muslims from across the country, and more intensively so, as Grande pointed out, we've been seeing a disturbing increased rate of hate crimes, unfortunately, in the last 2 months since the Paris attacks. But the common theme we're hearing from Muslim Americans, unfortunately, is that they have a level of fear and anxiety about the safety of their families, of their communities, and really, frankly, really questioning their place and their future in our own country. It's a level of fear and anxiety, frankly, that I have not seen before. It's even worse than it was in the immediate weeks and months after 9/11. And so that's why we think it's absolutely crucial that we are at a juncture in our country where it's absolutely important that all Americans of goodwill take a stand and speak out against this hate and violence. And we are certainly very appreciative of Attorney General Lynch's leadership in not only calling out the bigotry, but taking the steps and starting to hold the perpetrators of violence and discrimination motivated by anti-Muslim bias, and starting to hold them accountable. The department has opened a couple of prosecutions, has opened the investigation into the Irving, Texas high school that suspended Ahmed Muhammad, and we are certainly appreciative of her leadership. But there's certainly more that needs to be done, because there's certainly a number of challenges facing the community.
Farhana, you talked about the need for people to speak out or speak up, as Lorraine was talking about during World War II, which did not happen. It is happening to some degree now, but is it enough? I mean, with Donald Trump, certainly after he made his comments about isolating out Muslims coming into the country, in fact, he not only stayed up on the polls, but I mean, my general impression, I've been spending a little quality time watching these Republican debates, if you can call that quality time, and it seemed like a lot of the other contenders were basically saying, me too, Ben Carson et al. I mean, do we have the kind of speaking out that's necessary?
Yeah, well, there's clearly still more that needs to be done. So people like the President, the Attorney General are doing their part. We have even sports celebrities like a Green Bay quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who very courageously called out a fan who had screamed an anti-Muslim epithet before a game. And there are everyday Americans, and I think each of us in our own lives, whether it's in the workplace, in our schools, even on social media, on Facebook, when you see someone in your social circle that's making a bigoted statement, making a bigoted comment, I think it's time for us to speak out, because this rhetoric is having, unfortunately, very deadly consequences, and it just doesn't reflect who we are. So it really is time for us to do that. And there's more that clearly needs to be done.
I thought immediately after 9/11, one of the editorials I can think of where we did praise President Bush, the Chronicle, was when he went to a mosque shortly after 9/11 and made the point that we are not at war with Islam. And certainly President Obama has made the same point. But is it, what is your take, Lori, looking back at World War II? Was literally nobody speaking out?
Oh, there were some really wonderful, brave individuals. People talk about the Woodwards on Bainbridge Island, a small little Bainbridge Island newspaper who spoke out against the incarceration. Certain individuals across the West Coast who spoke up for their neighbors. Certain communities, the Quaker communities, certainly reached out to the Japanese American community. But this was few lone voices in basically against the popular press, the public figures, governors, the entire West Coast congressional delegation, and again, none of the major civil liberties organizations. The National ACLU wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, but eventually didn't want to, said that the incarceration could be opposed on the grounds of race prejudice, but did not want to question the power of Roosevelt's power to order the control of the Japanese American population. And so you see the major civil liberties organizations were really not stepping up to sound and condemn incarceration. And hopefully we can be better now.
Grant, do you see prosecutions on the horizon for some of this backlash and hate crimes that you referred to?
Sure. I do want to add, I mean, during World War II, there just weren't enough voices, but they got drowned out. There was an African-American newspaper, the Pittsburgh Courier, George Schuler, very eloquently said it was because of race. Even at the time, the mayor of Los Angeles and Colbert Olson, who's the governor of California, it did say treat your neighbors to be kind in that respect, but it was drowned out in all of that happened. In terms of the question, there clearly has been increase in hate crimes litigation by my colleagues at the Civil Rights Division. Anita Gupta, who's an Asian American, is the head of Civil Rights Division. Oh, there are people out there.
Welcome.
And they've looked at since 2001, 1,000 cases. I mean, they've looked at 1,000 incidents to see whether there's been a hate crimes issue. There have been, I think, 54 cases won on that issue. It's still a limited. It's one tool. What you can do on federal hate crimes, but there has been a strong push on those issues by the Justice Department, by the Attorney General, and by the Civil Rights Division.
We are going to be going to audience questions momentarily, so raise your hand. We have volunteers with microphones at the ready. Let me get in one more question before we go to audience questions. I think one parallel that it seems like we can see between what happened in World War II and what is happening today is it's somehow seen that Americans' loyalty is being questioned. And certainly that was, as you pointed out, Lori, fundamental to World War II. But we're seeing this now. I mean, Farhana, it must be offensive when you hear some of these politicians say, these Muslims need to speak out. It's not enough for us to speak out. I mean, it really becomes where your fundamental loyalty is being questioned.
It's certainly been a very challenging time, let me just say. And this is something we've been dealing with as a community, I think, since the horrific attacks of September 11th. And it's been kind of a little bit there under the surface, or kind of on the fringes of the blogosphere. And it's just now really just snowballed and obviously morphed to be something that presidential candidates think that it's legitimately to start to question. I think what gives me hope, though, is I'm going to reference something Lori was mentioning, which was a very important federal court decision that took place. It was issued last fall that I'm not sure many people are aware of, and maybe is another kind of contrast to the time during World War II when the internment policies began and the lack of courage that we saw, unfortunately, from our courts. Lori was referencing the New York Police Department surveillance program, and they basically have had a program of targeting Muslim communities in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, in which they've sent undercover agents and informants into mosques, Muslim-owned businesses, shops, onto college campuses, and infiltrated the Muslim student groups on those college campuses at places like Rutgers, Yale, Columbia, not because of any evidence of criminal activity, but simply because these are places where Muslims would congregate. And the NYPD wanted to collect information about these communities. So we got a group of plaintiffs and we basically sued the NYPD. The NYPD asked the lower court to throw the case out, saying there's no claim here. We appealed, and last fall the appeals court ruled our way, and it was a they said that we did in fact have legitimate constitutional claims, and what was particularly heartening for us was that it was a 3-judge panel, 2 Democratic appointees, 1 Republican appointee, and it was a unanimous decision from the court. And not only that, and one of the strongest passages from the judges, they said that we've been down this road before. The treatment of Jewish Americans during the Red Scare, the treatment of the African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, and the treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And going to your comment, John, in the next sentence they said, loyalty is a matter of the heart and mind, not your race, creed, or color. And that was a federal appeals court decision issued this past October. And so that gives me hope. And we have to just keep fighting the good fight, that our country's better angels will prevail.
On that On that hopeful note, let's go to audience questions.
Yeah, I have a question about the original Supreme Court decision on Mr. Korematsu, and that law still stands, right, in the Supreme Court. So what would it take to get that overturned?
Let's go to the law professor for that.
So it's a really, really challenging question. It's actually kind of a really interesting question. You've got the Supreme Court case that's up there, and as you say, it hasn't been overruled, it's still there. But the quorum nobis cases, when Fred reopened his case, the quorum nobis cases established that the factual basis for the decision was false. The Supreme Court was presented a falsified record. So now we have this U.S. Supreme Court case, and it's been established that it has no factual basis. Now that doesn't mean that it's not good law anymore. So what would it take? I mean, the problem is you need the exact same kind of case to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court in order for the court to be able to say that you can't do this. Let's hope we don't have that same case go up, right? So I think that that's the real challenging thing, is to really get at that decision. You need a very similar case to go up again. But I think that my sense about it and my fear about it is that these things happen not because there's a case out there or a law out there or a statute out there. These things happen because the public allows them to happen. And so the fact that there's a Supreme Court case there doesn't necessarily, isn't a guarantee that it's not going to happen if we all let it happen again. So I suppose that that's not a direct answer to your question, but it's my answer to say that everybody has to do what they can to make sure we don't allow it to happen again.
Yeah.
Next question.
I have a question for you, Mr. Diaz. You know, we've talked about public opinion and with people speaking out, but the power of the press is really significant in this country. And I've seen your editorials decrying the kind of racism that's going on in terms of anti-Arab, anti-Muslim sentiment, and your connection, or you made the connection to the Japanese-American incarceration, which was also wrong. What is your sense of the editorial pages in other parts of the country? Are they taking such a similarly aggressive stance against this kind of discrimination?
Well, certainly good question. Certainly most of the major newspapers have condemned Trump and the mayor of Roanoke, Virginia before him. And one thing that we're not seeing now that I think was very prevalent in World War II is editorial cartoons, which can have a great influence on public opinion. There were cartoons that caricatured Japanese Americans in unflattering ways. I haven't seen any evidence of that in this current wave. But I think at the same time, there are so many voices out there that the power of the press has been diminished somewhat, because I've heard people talk about it's now the iPodization of news, where people listen to news, whether they're on the right with Fox News or on the left with MSNBC, that basically validates their preconceptions. And I think that's a very dangerous trend that we're seeing in media.
One thing, John, I add is, while we may not see the explicit type of bias, you certainly still see implicit bias or unconscious bias, and I think we have to take them into account. For example, I think there was some research that shows when you look at Muslim Americans that they actually rate higher in polling in terms of unfaithfulness or violence, and that's the stereotype that exists. I think there's a lot of work, you talk about the work, we also do a lot of work on law enforcement community relations, the implicit bias that exists against African Americans. Jerry Kang's professor at UCLA does that around Asian Americans. That's something we also have to pay attention to and think about, and what decisions are made, and what happens in the schools, what happens at work as well.
To use a coin of phrase from Super Bowl week, we're at the 2-minute warning, so we have time for one more question. Sir, you're up.
I'd just like to address what you said at the very beginning of the panel. And you talked about how Donald Trump stated that he thought the U.S. was off, like in a sort of wonky way or whatever. And I'd just like to say, like, why would he want to run for president? Why would he want to have almost entire control over a nation that was off? Like, is he trying to correct it in his own image, or is he trying to basically control it? And I'd like to state that the NYPD videotaping and surveying Muslim communities is sort of an example of that. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
I can't speak to what Mr. Trump's motivations are and why exactly he's on our television every night. But I can say this, that it's certainly what we expect from individuals who are running for public office, whether it's a president to your local position, local school board, whatever the case might be. I think we can all agree that we expect public officials to bring us together as Americans to address our challenges and not use divisive rhetoric and fear-mongering. That does not, in the long run, serve our nation.
I do want to acknowledge you're speaking up. I think that's important. I think it's great that you're speaking about this. You should consider running for office. I do want to say, I mean, it's important that we have 2 Muslim Americans in Congress, Ellison and Carson. We have a first Hindu congressional member and Buddhist as well, Senator Hirano. That matters for, I think, the right to practice your religion, that we have to consider that as a way of dealing with some of these issues as well.
Yeah, and to your point, I think there's nothing new about the politics of division in America. I think what is unusual about this campaign is that in the Trump situation, it is so out there. He is so blatant about it and so unapologetic about it and so unsubtle about it. And at the moment, he remains the front runner. But let's keep in mind, he is the front runner with about 30% of the Republican vote right now. That means 70% of Republicans are not supporting him, let alone the general population. So there are limits. The politics of division is working for him, but if I could add another sign of hope, there's a limit to how far that will take a campaign.
That's right.
Well, I want to get a quick last word before our 2 minutes are up, which they probably are.
Thank you all for being here, for being part of this effort in advancing Fred's legacy. It's so important that his message continue, that we all fight intolerance where we can.
Well, thank you very much, and thank my panelists for really a great discussion. And if there's 2 words that we can leave you with, and I think it pervaded all of the comments here, is speak up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Love, Ms. Khera, Ms. Bannai, Mr. Diaz, for having us as part of your conversation. It's very interesting. Our next performers are grassroots youth performing arts group joining us from Oakland, led by director Leroy Lynn Davis, artistic director Hodari Davis, whose mission is to study African American history and culture, poetry, music, writings, art, and movement. Ladies and gentlemen, hang on to your seats. Please welcome to the stage Young, Gifted, and Black.
Hello, we are Young, Gifted, and Black from Oakland, California, and we are honored to be here to celebrate Fred Korematsu's life.
These are songs.
Reasons for Black children to sing, elegies for forgotten passions and poems. Written on those warriors, freedom fighters, artists, ancestors determined to put in the minds and mouths and hearts and souls of our people. These words are mantras, the late night meditation, meant to be dreamed and memorized and recited before these lessons. Meant to be taught in real time, to make them heroes of prior repetition, make them heroes of prior consistency, prior responsibility, culture. To save ourselves, we must save them. You must save us. We must save you. Requires awareness, acceptance, actual application of what we know is right, rather than our demands. You gotta do better. We must accept better for you, for ourselves. We cannot become the rest of the earth. The God gives them our own undereducation. Rulers say the feelings of some bad annihilation. These songs are written for us. To inspire another generation. We cannot afford to not know the words. Here we go, and our going out leaves everybody blind. You know we have hate on our mind. We just keep proud to our own kind. We're gonna let our little light shine bright. We'll let you read, and it don't stop. Black history, and it won't stop. Feelings we lead to bubble tea. Of you and I, to the PPP, and the legacy, and it don't stop. Black history, and it won't stop. We'll let you read, and the message of this century. And our going out leaves everybody blind. You know we have hate on our mind. We just keep proud to our own kind. We're gonna let our little light shine. And our going out leaves everybody blind. You know we have hate on our mind. We just keep proud to our own kind. We're gonna let our little light shine. Just remember this. Black women are white. Just remember this. Race of all our rights and ignorance. That means we can turn. We can walk with us. We can talk with us. We can ride the bus. Instead of in a truck, we'll all walk to work. Are you really there? Or over here? Are you brave enough? Do you live in fear? Are you tough enough? Just be the word. All of us together. Let freedom ring on. Let freedom ring together. Let freedom ring just in the word. All of us together. Let freedom ring on. Let freedom ring together. Let freedom ring together. We realize on mountaintop. A dream in the sky is all hip hop. Living in a high game change. Just know you can be rearranged. I'm more than to be all over the world. Proud black boys, strong black girls who many use the voice to bring back the laws. Just because we don't get damn black. Now point out leaves everybody blind. You know we have hate on our mind. We just keep proud to our own kind. We're gonna let our little light shine. Now point out leaves everybody blind. You know we have hate on our mind. We just keep proud to our own kind. We're gonna let our little light shine. We'll let you be, and it don't stop.
Told you those kids would rip it. Give it up once again for Young, Gifted, and Black. So I'm about to introduce you to some more young people who are backstage right now, and after these kids wrapped up here just now, some of the kids are doing this, doing the old Greek snapping fingers, really appreciative of that. So, next we have another group of young people. These are students from Castlemont, Oakland Tech, and Palo Alto High Schools. They're going to join us in a discussion with California Supreme Court Justice Mariano-Florentino Cuéllar about how the legacy of Fred Korematsu teaches us important lessons about working toward racial and social justice today. Justice Cuéllar has served on the California Supreme Court since January of last year. Previously, he had an extensive career in public service, university administration, and legal academia. He was on the faculty of Stanford University and was the director of Stanford's Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. He also served in the federal executive branch in several roles, including the White House as a special assistant to the president for justice and regulatory policy. He also co-chaired the U.S. Department of Education's National Equity and Excellence Commission. Please welcome Justice Cuéllar and the students.
Good evening, everyone, and happy birthday, Fred Korematsu. It's a special honor for me to be here tonight, not only because I had the privilege of meeting Fred Korematsu in the early 2000s, but because I get to share the stage with some extraordinary students. Now, when I was first invited and honored with the invitation to this event, I was told that I might get a chance to share a few remarks, and I started working on pages and pages that I was going to read you, but much to my surprise and for the good of the audience, in fact, instead I get to share the stage with some students, and it's going to be a lot more interesting. I will have a few thoughts I want to share at the end, but I want to start by giving you a chance to meet these wonderful students whom I've had the chance to talk to over the last few minutes. And I have to tell you, I'm impressed with them. I'd like to hire them all as my law clerks. So I wanted them each to tell you their name, the school they're from, and one thing they like about themselves. So then we'll get started with our conversation. We'll start right over here.
My name is Miriam Castillo, and I'm from Casamount High School in Oakland. And something to know about me is that I love animals, especially lizards.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Brooks from Casamount High School in Oakland. And something to know about myself, I love music.
What's up, guys? My name is Morris Jackson. I come from Oakland Technical High School. Something that you should know about me is I never got a haircut in my life. It's my 13th year.
Hold on.
Hi, my name is Michelle Tang. I'm from Palo Alto High School, and something that I like about myself would be I really love playing guitar and writing songs, and some embarrassing history here, but Taylor Swift was the person who got me into it.
We're gonna make up for that tonight.
Hi, I'm Teresa Tran, and I'm from Palo Alto High School, and I like to sing when I'm showering.
Hi, I'm Ceci Riz. I'm from Palo Alto High School, and I arrived in America about a year and a half ago from France.
Hi everybody, my name is Sean Romeo. I'm a junior at Palo Alto High School. One thing about me is I currently play for the football team, which has really been a highlight of my life at school.
Hi, I'm Serena Nguyen, and I'm also from Palo Alto High School, and something about me is I'm really into photography.
Hi, I'm Maya Lati. I'm a junior at Palo Alto High School, and I play basketball and run track.
Terrific. So my first question to you is, so many people in America have had the privilege of learning something about Fred Korematsu. But imagine somebody came from a faraway land. In fact, imagine somebody came from Mars or outer space, had never heard of Fred Korematsu. What would you explain about him so that this person can understand why Fred Korematsu is important? Who wants to start? I'm a law professor, so I love to call on people.
If someone came from Mars and asked, who is Fred Korematsu, I would have to say that he was a person who did not take anything that was wrong from the government. He realized that, hey, you can't just force me out of my home just because of my descendant, or who my descendants were, where they were from. He didn't want to leave his house, and he didn't take it. And I think that's an inspiration, because you shouldn't just let someone walk all over you. You shouldn't let someone who's supposed to protect you, like the government, walk all over you. You should stand up for what is right.
I'll basically sum it up and just tell the person if they didn't know who Fred Korematsu was, I basically said Fred Korematsu lives in each and one of us, right? Because, you know, we all kind of fight what we believe in, you know. When we want something, we fight for it, even if it's wrong or right to others, you know. So that's what I'll basically say.
I will also add that Fred Korematsu was a person that displayed like how you live is also a form of resistance, and so basically his life is it displayed resistance, and that's how it tells the person.
I would say that Fred Korematsu was a very important person, not because of his status or anything like that, but because he had the courage to speak up for like what matters to him on behalf of his peers, his race. And as an Asian American, I think that's so important because my family, my parents immigrated from China. They're engineers, and I feel like the voice that they have in this country does not measure up to the hard work that they put in their job. And the fact that in history there was someone who could speak up and say that we matter, we are Americans too, I think that's like really important to me and many others.
I like to build off what Morris and Michelle said, that he is really just like one of us, all of us. He's an ordinary person who lived an ordinary life, and he wasn't he wasn't a president or some elite government official who lived in a realm that we couldn't reach to. He was living his life, he ran into injustice, and he's had to stand up against that. And I think he really acts as an inspiration to all of us to stand up what is wrong in each of our lives.
So a number of you have mentioned the importance of standing up for what you believe in. I want to ask you, what do you believe in that you're willing to stand up for, and what do you think young people, high school students can do to change the world? Who wants to start? Over here.
Something I believe in is that everybody should have be treated the same, no matter their race, gender, or their sexual orientation. And something that us high school students can do is start by learning all these about different cultures and what makes that person unique, so that when we enter rooms where there's different cultures, different races, and different genders, we know how to treat them in a way that is respectful, and they feel honored to be treated respectfully.
One thing that the question was just willing to fight for, right? I'm ready to die for my religious beliefs. So I mean, I will fight to death for my religious beliefs, right? Because I mean, that's just something that it's embedded in my brain, right? I live my life by my religious beliefs, so I'll always fight for it. And I feel like some high school students, how they can change the world is just basically going to class and listening to the teachers, right? Because you get certain ethics from high school or school, right? And so, if you keep going every day and whatnot, you're ready for the real world. The real world.
So I believe in love and acceptance, and I think that if everyone got to know each other, got to know one another, and was willing to learn about different religions and cultures, we'd all be more unified. And I think that it's really important to get to know people who are like you. So I feel like it's just important to accept diversity. And yeah, that's one of my values.
So I think something really important about our world today is that the actual generation today is really influenced by the social medias and everything. And I think we have to, something that we can do to change how we see things today is that the media is actually one of our basic sources to know what's going on in the world. But if their perception is not the good one and is a perception that gives us the wrong idea and that gives us also an image that is not the reality, we are not going to see how the things are actually in the world. And so something that we can do today to change this generation is to be aware of that what the social media are showing us, and to use it, but not in the way that we are today, because they're spreading information that is not always okay, and that is not spreading love or tolerance. They're spreading things that is going to scare us and that is going to give us a bad idea and a bad image of a certain type in the society. So we have to learn about it and to have a certain confidence and trust in, for example, our teachers that may have way better vision of the world than the media and what can surround us today.
Thank you.
And as Sissy said, that social media really affect our generation a lot because, like women's, did you know that the people who are reporting the news, like women's, they wear makeup, nice hairstyle, and for men, although they have they don't have a lot of hair on their head, but did you see any woman? They have a not bad hairstyle, but they're not same as men. That we have to dress ourselves nicely in front of people, and because that is what the society tells us. And now the young students that I feel is they think that their looking is more important than what they have inside. And I think that is not right, because what you look doesn't affect you more than what you really have inside your brain and what you really think. So
I think that was very touching. I'm really amazed. Yeah, for me, I think that the unique problem of being in this generation, also navigating through the complexities that we see, so many sources of information. What story do we listen to? On social media, on Facebook, what story, who am I? How do I develop my values when there are so many stories and so many perspectives out there? And I think that what's really important for us is to keep in mind that, to stick with our beliefs, to believe that what's humane, what's good, and to know that everyone, no matter how different we are and how much racism and sometimes hatred there is out there, that we are fundamentally human, and that shared humanity is what I think is very important.
In the last few days, I've had a chance to reflect quite a bit, just talking to family and friends about what in the world makes us optimistic and what makes us concerned. I want to share in a moment some of the things that make me concerned, but I have to tell you, what makes me optimistic is to hear the thoughts of this generation and to imagine all the ways in which each one of you is going to rise up to the challenge of making our world a better place. I'm inspired. Both of my kids are here tonight, and one thing I greatly appreciate about my kids is the enormous patience they have with both of their parents, with my wife and me, when we start talking to them about history. Whether we're talking to them about Alexander Hamilton, or Daniel Inouye, Dolores Huerta, or John F. Kennedy, they manage to stay with us a little bit before running away, or trying to move the conversation to topics they consider maybe just as important, like Percy Jackson or the San Francisco Giants. What I see in their eyes, though, is that, like my colleagues up here on the stage right now, my kids, and so many kids across the country, are able to dream about and to think about real giants, historical giants, and to almost take a time trip, to do time travel and go back in history, and to imagine what a moment was like in history. And I want to reflect for a moment, not on 1942, but I'll get there, but instead on June 26, 1963. John F. Kennedy is in West Berlin, and he's standing before tens of thousands of people in West Berlin, and he's trying to give them reassurance that America is going to stand with its allies. But here's the challenge that John F. Kennedy also had right then and there. He was smart enough to know that that was a challenge. The challenge was that the whole position of America in the world, its ability to buck up its allies and to change the world, depended on trying to tell a story about how things at home were going, and trying to put those things in the most positive light. Civil rights, divisions of income, of race, of region. And Kennedy was smart enough to understand that he couldn't sugarcoat some things that were not going so well. He's famous for saying in that speech, "Ich bin ein Berliner," which he thought meant, "I too am a Berliner." Unfortunately, he didn't realize it meant, "I'm a jelly donuts." But he's not so remembered for some other phrase that he said, which is what I want to call attention to as we close this event tonight. And that is, freedom has many difficulties. Democracy is not perfect. Every word you've heard up on the stage today is a testament to that reality. How apt those words were for Fred Korematsu and for what he lived through 21 years earlier. For me, meeting him was an extraordinary privilege, as if I'd actually traveled through time to meet someone whose life indeed spoke volumes about the country and its unfinished business. He was thoughtful and kind. He spoke of the world in the 1940s and how he had a life here in the Bay Area that he didn't want to leave. He's remembered in part for a court case, but we should also remember he wanted something as simple as it was right, to be treated like the American that he was. The world is very different now in many ways. We have less hunger. More girls complete education around the world. Our lives are longer. We spend more of our lives fiddling with supercomputers in our pockets. Many people grow up to know that they have rights wherever we live, and they live. But the world is also not so different. And particularly at a time when people began to put out there in the public square the idea that maybe Japanese internment was okay, or that maybe we can exclude whole classes of people, summarily from the country, or that maybe America has lost a certain greatness that we should know better to recognize it perhaps can never lose, because that greatness depends on our ability to know that the country is always making itself better, always improving itself, always trying to live up to ideals that are taxing and demanding on us. And the most important thing that I'd like my kids to reflect on and remember, and that I'd like to reflect on and remember myself, is quite simply that in order to rise up to the challenge of being everything that we can be, we must remember history, because otherwise, as Churchill said, we are condemned to repeat it. Thank you very much and good night.
Conversations like that with our youth. Thank you again to Justice Cuéllar for leading us, and thanks again for the students for being so candid in their answers here. Now, founded in 1965 on the Bueno grape-striped picket lines of Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers Union, El Teatro Campesino has set the standard for Latino theatrical production in the United States. At first performing shorts and skits from the back of flatbed trucks and in union halls, in 1971, the company found a home in San Juan Bautista. Since then, El Teatro Campesino and its founding artistic director, Luis Valdez, has toured the world, created several motion pictures, and won numerous prestigious awards. Valdez's most recent work, Valley of the Heart, is a love story rooted in historical events centered in the fertile Santa Clara Valley near San Jose. Joining me now, in welcoming actor and current cast member of the San Jose Stage Company's production of Valley of the Heart, Ryan Takamiya, as he tells us more about this culturally and historically significant play. Please welcome Ryan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Takamiya. I'm an actor, and I'm so honored to have been invited here tonight to tell you about an exciting new play that's being staged in San Jose. that portrays the internment in a way that you've never quite seen before. Written and directed, like John said, by Luis Valdez of the famous Latino-American theater company, El Teatro Campesino. The play, Valley of the Heart, tells the story of a Japanese-American family and a Mexican-American family living and working on a farm in San Jose in 1941 at the outset of World War II. For those of us who remember, San Jose and the Silicon Valley actually used to be called Valley of the Heart's Delight, and we really take that to heart in this play. My character, Joe Yamaguchi, is the Nisei son of the family which gets sent to the Heart Mountain internment camp. There's also a bit of a Romeo and Juliet story in there, but I don't want to ruin it for everybody. With xenophobia on the rise today, we at El Teatro Campesino feel that it is more important than ever to tell these stories of cross-cultural intersectionality, and to do so in a way that is positive, artistic, and hits you on an emotional level, and just entertaining, really. To give you a taste of the play, I've brought with me a short clip that I hope you'll enjoy, but before we get to that, I just also want to remind you that nothing quite beats the energy of live theater. So I invite you all to come join us and see the world premiere of Valley of the Heart from February 13th to March 6th at the San Jose Stage Company. Come and see the story of our communities come alive. Information about the play can be found in your programs and also at elteatrocampesino.com. Thank you very much and enjoy.
My parents want me to get married. They've already picked out my fiancé and made arrangements with his family. Excuse me? It's an old-fashioned Japanese custom. So what? This is America. Don't you get a say in this? I don't want to shame them. He's coming to see you tonight, Calvin. Mama. He's the last Nisei in the world without to be a truck park.
My father's import-export business. I've learned to say I love him in 12 languages. The heaven never mentioned his name. How long have you known about him? I've loved you since the first day I saw you on this ranch. You said you loved me too. Are you really going to throw away all we've had in these last 2 years?
It's impossible love, man.
It's bullshit. Talk to your son. My son. I seen the way Ben and Teruko look at each other. Tell me your son, my daughter belongs to another man now. You gotta start making plans. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about you know what.
Do you love me, Ben? Do you really love me? Because if you do, I'm willing to be your wife.
You mean it?
Do I have any choice?
I can't believe it!
That makes two of us, Lila. And may the kabuki gods have mercy on our souls.
You're not gonna believe what's happened. Jesus Christ! We're at war with Japan. My dad's in jail. What? Sakamoto-san? Arrested? Picked up on the FBI this morning. They're rounding up all the prominent Issei leaders on the West Coast.
I am Japanese. It's a Japanese army land in San Francisco. I don't know how to leave the rising star. You're kidding, right?
Mom, if you do that, I'll have to carry the stars and stripes aside and go fight those Japs. What do you mean, Japs? Who are the Japs? You think the Hollies can tell the difference between Issei and Nisei? This versus on the insane channel. What the hell are you thinking?
We're in love.
That's hogwash. Your first responsibility is to your family. This isn't the guy that locked up his sister, is it? If you watch your mouth when it comes to my wife, you're right. She's gonna be my wife. Fuck her. We were out in the middle of nowhere. denying me my basic rights in this concentration camp. If I say no, they're liable to take away my citizenship and send me back to Japan where I've never even been.
Dear Ben, I can't believe you've been apart for 3 months. I miss you terribly. Wish that you were here with baby Benjamin with me.
Now, for Pete's sake, what's going to take you all to understand? My wife and kid are freezing in that beach of prison in Wyoming. Don't you see? If you go back, Mom will go with you. We'll never be able to see each other again. It'll destroy this family. The only reason I'm here and she's here is to all citizens of Japanese ancestry are classified as foreign enemy aliens. He's my son. I married your daughter, Thelma. We're making a go of it. I'm farming over 200 acres now. The Army buys everything we produce. The Yamaguchi truck farm is going strong. Police, you treated my people. Smash our whole factory. I cannot allow this. Go!
Last but not least tonight, I'm honored to welcome to the stage the person who carries on the fight of Fred Korematsu every day of her life. She's the founder and executive director of the Fred Korematsu Institute, the daughter of Fred Korematsu, Korematsu.
Well, what did you think of the program? This is what Fred Korematsu Day is all about, is to have these kinds of discussions and share our different ethnic backgrounds, to really learn about each other and to learn respect. You know, my father really believed in education, and that's why he crisscrossed the United States and spoke to different organizations, because he didn't want something like the Japanese American incarceration to happen again. And look what's happened since 1942, over 70 years now, we're still facing these same issues that occurred in 1942. It's a pretty sad thing to say. And it's sad for me to say that actually Korematsu versus United States, my father's Supreme Court case, is more relevant now than it even was then. And so, as we've talked about this evening, have we learned our lessons of history? And that's really the goal and the mission of the Korematsu Institute. Education to advance racial equity, social justice, and human rights, so that our generations now and future generations hopefully will get to a point where we will have world peace. I don't know if we'll see it in my lifetime, but it's something that my father always strived for, and so are we. There's so many people to thank, because obviously, as you can see, to put together a program like this, it really takes a village. I wanted to thank our committee. Can I have the lights, please? I feel like I'm just talking to the dark here. Our steering committee has been just unbelievable, and headed by, actually, I'm proud to say, our new education program director, Frida Lynn. Frida, where are you? Frida, where are you? Oh, there she is. She has worked tirelessly. I have thrown everything at her, because I've been traveling all over the United States, and she really has organized everyone, it's been a great evening. You know, we've Lisa Oyama and Debbie Ching and Margie Barrows, Jessica Chan, Peggy Saika, I'm probably leaving somebody out, all helped in organizing this event. And it's been really a labor of love, I think. Obviously, since we've been having to compete with the Super Bowl people, and I almost thought, well, maybe we should just take this and go to Chris Isaac's concert since it was free, and we'd have our own Fred Korematsu audience. But I'm glad all of you are here because it means that you're committed. You're committed, and you think that social justice is important, and to have these ideas shared amongst us. I want to also thank, I said earlier at our VIP reception, our sponsors, because they really have helped us to be able to have this type of program. And, Leftwich Event Specialists is the first time we worked with them, but also they've given a lot of their own time and to help, because last year I was like behind the stage and no one ever even saw me. And they said, Karen, you can't do that. So they've been a really big help. Chef's Touch, Catering, and Manami Tamaki, of course, they were part of my father's Quorum Novus legal team. And I always thought that actually, my father and the team would be the ones that would be carrying on the education which they have, and I never thought that I would be doing this as well. But they've always been very supportive and encouraging, and I really very much appreciate that. The main goal and work of our institute is the teacher education kits that we have developed. As a result of the legislative bill being signed in 2010 by Governor Schwarzenegger, it established our first Fred Korematsu Day in California on this day, but in 2011. And this is our 6th anniversary. I didn't know where this was going to lead, because it's not really a holiday where you have it off, and so a lot of people still don't know about it, and that's why we continue with this education. It's in perpetuity, which is really great, and now we've made some strides in actually reaching out to other states. So Hawaii has their Fred Korematsu Day, and actually the state of Virginia, believe it or not, in February, signed their legislative bill establishing Fred Korematsu Day in perpetuity. So we had a celebration last night, and they're going to have another dedication at the Capitol in Richmond next week. But during this week, I've also been kind of on this Fred Korematsu Day, what I call like a whistle stop by jet. But was in Michigan, working with the state legislature there through education. They wanted to know more about who is Fred Korematsu and what would this mean to Michigan, and had both the Senate and the House very supportive. They've already introduced their legislative bills that now are in committee, and actually the Senate and the House additionally proclaimed Fred Korematsu Day for their state, and I also brought back a proclamation by the governor of Michigan. So it's nice to know that we have that kind of support. Also, South Carolina has introduced their bill. Florida has passed their bill in the Senate, and now it's in the House. And the momentum is just really, really heartwarming, but also really the point of Fred Korematsu Day is education, is to not just say, okay, we have Fred Korematsu Day, but what does it mean? What are the lessons of history, as we've talked about this evening, that are important for these students to learn? So fortunately, have a grant challenge from the Wallace H. Culture Foundation. Through the money that we raise, they will match it dollar for dollar, which is very exciting to have that kind of ability to grow our donations and for all the work that we need to do. So what you do for us in donating is very important, and every dollar that you give will be doubled. And we hope you will consider that, because obviously from the discussion this evening, we have a lot of work to do. There are a lot of people that need educating and a lot of students that need educating, and we need your help in doing that. Professor Lorraine Bannai didn't talk about her book, but she has just written a book about my father called Enduring Conviction, Fred Korematsu's Quest for Justice. And actually, she's going to be doing a book signing out in the lobby after the program. So I encourage you to donate. When you donate, you will receive a book that she will personally sign. And we're very proud of the fact that she's written more about my father, but also about the Japanese American incarceration and the relative issues today. So I hope you will tell your friends and buy the book and really share this story with everyone. Also, as you leave the theater, we're going to have donation baskets. So if you have extra dollars you want to throw in there, we would be very appreciative. But we really do appreciate your support. And obviously, the students here are really inspiring. I want to applaud again their participation from Palo Alto High School and Oakland Tech and Casamont High School. So give them a round of applause. And you should know that Casamont High School is the high school that my father graduated from. So it really has come full circle. And it's so exciting to see these students have that kind of connection, as having the fourth school named after my father dedicated this morning in El Cerrito, the Fred T. Korematsu Middle School. It's very exciting to see how his legacy has grown, and I think he would really, truly be amazed. So as you leave here, remember what you've heard tonight, but don't just keep it into yourself. Share it. Share these stories that you've heard. Talk about what these students are thinking, because it's important to have other people think that they can make a difference. And that's Fred Korematsu's story. So if my father were here, he would say, stand up for what is right and don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you, and see you next year on Fred Korematsu.